I said I was a beta, just to get the job. It was supposed to be harmless. The reception of the research center had the personality of a refrigerator. Glass, brushed metal, precise seams where nothing dared stick out. The lighting was so clean it felt like an apology. A receptionist with a perfect bun slid a clipboard toward me, a discreet scent. Neutralizer hummed under the counter, grinding the air into sterile compliance. "Full name?" she asked, as if the question might try to escape. "Sami Park," I said, pen already hovering. My hand shook, and I told myself it was caffeine. It wasn't. I checked a box that would make everything simple, beta. A tiny lie. A lowercase sin. Something you could tuck behind a signature and never have to look at again. My reflection stared at me from the glossy surface of the counter. Narrow face. Careful. Hair. The kind of smile that promises good behavior it doesn't intend to deliver. I could pass. I had passed before. Betas are neutral. Safe. Nobody stares at a beta like he's trouble. New hire? The voice came from the left, quiet even, with a weight to it like the first step onto a gym floor. I glanced up. The man was tall enough to make the architectural lines around him look decorative. Dark hair, clean jaw, a suit that fit like a rule. The badge clipped to his belt read, Tarren Cade, Security. He wasn't smiling, but his eyes were intent, like he was reading footnotes under my skin. The receptionist brightened. "Chief Cade, this is Mr. Park, Lab Operations." "Welcome," he said to me. It wasn't warm exactly. It was focused. The room tightened an inch. "Thanks," I managed. I went back to the form because paper is easier than scrutiny. Phone, address, emergency contact, none. I scratched out my sister's name, then wrote it again, smaller, as if that would make it less real. "Do you go by Sami?" he asked. I nodded without looking. "Unless I'm in trouble. Then my full name gets pronounced like an exorcism." A beat. Duly noted. I slid the clipboard back. The receptionist scanned it into the hungry mouth of a machine. "You'll do an orientation video and a quick scent neutral check," she said. "Policy for shared spaces." "Of course." "Policy." I swallowed. My scent blocker patch lay under my sleeve, cool against my skin, a fragile dam pretending it could hold back weather. Tarren moved aside to let an intern pass. His proximity felt loud. Not a smell, not exactly, more like a frequency my bones recognized with irritation. I stared harder at the laminated visitor pass, as if it could explain itself. "You'll need a temporary badge," he said. "Follow me. There are 100 hallways in places like this. They're designed to make you behave. Even the floors ask permission before squeaking." I kept my steps measured, my breathing even. The patch held. I told myself I couldn't smell him. I told myself a lot of things. "You're joining Dr. Miller's unit?" he asked, leading me through a glass door that opened with the sigh of a well-fed vault. "Lab ops," I said. "I keep the machines happy, and the lunches correctly labeled. My greatest passion is tape." His mouth didn't quite curve, but the air around his eyes softened by a millimeter. "We take tape very seriously." Finally. A culture fit. We reached security processing. More glass. More light that made your pores confess. A small device on the counter blinked like a friendly insect. Tarren gestured to it. "Hand." I set my palm in the cradle. It warmed, then cooled. A quiet beep. The technician glanced at a screen and nodded. "Neutral. Clear. Neutral." The word landed like a pat on the head. My lungs went loose. The patch worked. The lie held. Tarren's gaze didn't move from my face. Not impolite. Not invasive. Just attentive in a way that made me want to square my shoulders, and also fold into a pocket. "First day nerves?" he asked. "Are those optional?" I said, "For some. I'll take the standard package then." Nerves with a side of imposter syndrome. He hummed, a small sound that suggested amusement without surrendering to it. He walked me toward the elevators. The mirrored doors cut us into vertical stripes. In ours, I looked like someone hiding in a good shirt. In his, he looked like someone the good shirt would obey. We waited. The building exhaled around us. "You live close?" he asked. "Walking distance," I said. "I like to pretend my commute is exercise." "Do you run?" "Only from red flags." For the first time, the line of his mouth tilted, a half-smile so brief I could have imagined it. "Good policy." The elevator arrived. Inside, the temperature dipped a degree toward sensible. It was just the two of us. I became aware of the ridiculous rhythm of my heartbeat, like it was trying to Morse code me a message. "Bad idea, bad idea." He stood with his hands loose at his sides, attention forward. But I could feel him the way you feel a storm you're not looking at. Static braided through my shoulders. I checked my sleeve again. Fingers ghosting the edge of the patch. Fine. Everything was fine. I'd rehearsed this. Be the beta. Be neutral. Betas don't spike rooms or draw stairs like magnets. "Orientation is on 12, he said. "Then they'll walk you to Miller's lab. I'll need to run your access profile. Lunch hour is staggered. Cafeteria's on 4. He sounded like a manual. I clung to that. "Manuals don't stare." "Got it," I said. "Because monosyllables are the safest shape for lies." When the doors opened, he stepped out first and waited. Gentle courtesy dressed like standard procedure. We turned left into a corridor that looked like a promise of productivity, clean, humming, civilized. The orientation room had a table, a screen, and the kind of chairs that keep you honest. He opened the door, let me pass, then paused. "Mr. Park," he said. I turned. "Sami, please." "Mr. Park makes me feel like an overdue bill." His eyes loosened again at the edges. "Sami, if you need anything security related, ask. It's not a small facility, like getting lost, like getting found," he said. Not ominous, just precise. He left me with the video, a 20-minute hymn to safety and compliance set to stock piano. I watched, nodded at the right places, signed the digital acknowledgments, with a hand that had stopped shaking only because it was tired. A tray of scent-neutralizing strips sat by the door. I used one because good behavior is a kind of camouflage. When I came out, he was there again, speaking with another guard, low-voiced. He glanced up as if he'd been expecting the door to know my timing. "Ready?" he asked. "Born ready," I said. "Well, hired ready." We took a different route, cutting across an atrium that pretended the outside sky had feelings. The lab corridor smelled faintly of antiseptic lemon, pleasant in the way hospital TV shows lie about. Tarren keyed me through another set of doors, then stopped at a glass wall where a tiny placard read Miller, Systems Biology. "You'll start here," he said. "Your permanent badge will be issued before end of day." I nodded, hands in pockets so he wouldn't see them negotiating with gravity. "Thanks for the tour. 5 stars. Would recommend." He studied me for a second. That wasn't long in the clock sense, but felt like a stretch in the muscle sense. Precise, testing. "Enjoy your first day, Sami." "You too," I said, then wanted to slam my head gently into the glass. "You too?" "He lives here." He didn't correct me. He just gave the smallest nod, as if I'd offered a respectable attempt, and passed on effort. Then he walked away, the line of his shoulders clean as a blueprint. I stood there, watching his reflection disappear down the corridor, and told myself the heat crawling up my throat was embarrassment, not the echo of whatever frequency he carried with him. Betas don't echo. Betas don't hum. Betas don't feel the air recalibrate when a man leaves. Inside the lab, the world clicked into tasks, labels, logins, protocols in careful fonts. I breathed. I could do tasks. If identity is a house, tasks are the furniture you sit on so you don't notice the cracks. By noon, I had 3 passwords, 2 new blisters and 1 quiet victory. No one had asked the wrong questions. The lie had done its job, like tape over a hairline fracture. I told myself it would hold. I told myself he had only looked at me because new hires are risks. I told myself a lot of things. As I left to find the cafeteria, I caught my reflection again in the glass, my face thinner. Then I remembered, my mouth trying on relief like a jacket it wasn't sure it wanted. Somewhere down the hall, a door opened and shut with polite finality. The air shifted, and I knew without looking that he was close again, a brightness at the edge of vision. I didn't turn. I walked on, upright, neutral, unremarkable. The badge on my chest chimed softly against the zipper of my jacket, an honest sound against a dishonest label. I had cheated the system. But even then, under the fluorescent calm, under the hum of machines that prefer facts, something inside me uncoiled and whispered the truth no form can swallow. This won't stay harmless. The lab corridors had all the charm of a dentist's waiting room. White, glossy, sterile. Everything smelled faintly of antiseptic lemon and ozone, like the building had just been bleached of personality. I clutched my clipboard like it was a shield, pretending the weight of paper could balance me against the sharp air. My badge was supposed to unlock the door to Miller's lab. It didn't. I swiped once, twice. The reader blinked red both times, polite but unforgiving. Problem? The voice came from behind me, steady, low, a rhythm I already recognized. I turned, trying not to look like a criminal caught at the scene. Tarren Cade. Again, he held a tablet in one hand, but his eyes were on me, not the screen. Just bonding with technology, I said, forcing a shrug. We're in that awkward phase. He stepped forward, broad shoulders filling the sterile corridor, like he'd been measured against it. Without touching, he angled the tablet near my badge. A chime. It should work now. Should? I repeated, because sarcasm is cheaper than therapy. He didn't rise to it. We'll confirm in a second. Swipe again. I did. This time, the door blinked green and hissed open. See? Perfect relationship, I said. Me and electronics. Happily ever after. He studied me for a beat longer than necessary. Betas don't usually trip the system. My chest squeezed. The patch under my sleeve pulsed like a guilty heartbeat. Lucky me. Special snowflake, I said too quickly. His brow tilted. Not suspicion, not yet. Just attention sharpened. You have your ID on you? It's literally hanging on my chest. I tapped the badge. Want me to laminate a copy for your collection? Something flickered at the corner of his mouth, almost amusement. Do you always talk this much? Only when I'm nervous, I shot back. Or when security chiefs hover around new hires. That landed. A pause then. Only the suspicious ones. The corridor hummed around us, lights buzzing like bees in a glass hive. My palms dampened against the clipboard. My heart wasn't just beating. It was sprinting, trying to lap itself. I told myself it was because of authority, because alphas had a way of making betas twitch. Except, betas weren't supposed to feel like their entire nervous system was tuned to one person's frequency. I laughed, brittle. Guess I should have practiced my harmless beta face in the mirror. His gaze didn't waver. Not hostile, but unwavering, like he was cataloging micro-expressions. You seem tense. Well, you're 6'something, carry enough muscle to open these doors with your elbows, and keep looking at me like you're waiting for me to sprout horns. Tense feels appropriate. Or guilty, he said evenly. I swallowed. My throat was dry, but I made a show of rolling my eyes. I'm guilty of a lot. Bad coffee choices, terrible handwriting, sometimes eating other people's yogurt if it's not labeled. Is that a firing offense? For the first time, he actually smirked. Brief. Dangerous. We'll let HR decide on the yogurt. I hated the way relief tangled with irritation in my chest. I hated more the way my body responded, heat under my skin, a buzz in my ribs, like my pulse was auditioning for percussion. He gestured toward the lab. Go on. Don't keep Miller waiting. Gladly, I said, slipping inside before the door could second-guess me. But as it slid shut behind me, I caught his reflection in the glass, still watching, still too focused. Not hostile, not predatory, just tuned in, like I was a signal he couldn't stop tracking. I pressed my clipboard against my chest, trying to trap my heartbeat. He couldn't know. He couldn't smell through the patch. He couldn't, except the way my nerves lit whenever he was near whispered otherwise. Maybe he had already guessed. The cafeteria smelled like lemon sanitizer and burnt coffee, but today every scent was a shout. The air was crowded, too many lunches, too many voices, Too many alphas humming faintly at the edges of the room. My patch was still in place, pressed tight against my skin. But for the first time since started here, I could feel it straining, as if it were made of paper instead of chemistry. I slid my tray down the counter, ignoring the way my stomach twisted. Food was supposed to ground me. Today the steam rising from a pan of stir-fry nearly knocked me flat, every spice a spotlight on my tongue before I even tasted it. My head swam. Rough morning? I glanced up. Evan. Lab tech, friendly, standard beta. He carried the easy scent of detergent and paper. Harmless. He grinned at me. You look like you're about to duel that rice. I forced a laugh, trying to loosen my grip on the tray. Maybe I am. High noon. Cafeteria style. We found a table by the window. Noise bouncing off the glass. I sat too quickly, nearly sloshing my water. Evan poked at his sandwich, watching me with curious eyes. You ever notice, he said, casual as if he weren't setting off alarms in my spine, that you don't always act like a beta? The words hit like ice water. My fork clinked against the plate. What's that supposed to mean? He shrugged, still smiling. I don't know. You flinch at stuff. You get this alert look, like you're listening for things no one else hears. My sister's a beta. She never does that. It's more of an... He stopped, brows furrowing as if searching for the right word. Never mind. Maybe you're just jumpy. I forced my own shrug, made it lazy, bored. Congratulations, you've cracked the case. I'm a jumpy beta with a caffeine addiction. Send the report to HR. He laughed, shaking his head. Fine, fine, don't bite my head off. I'm just saying you're... different. Different. The word itched under my skin. My pulse thudded in my ears, and the patch burned cold against my arm, as if it knew it couldn't hold forever. I bent over my tray, pushing rice around. If I kept my head down, maybe the conversation would dissolve into background noise. And that's when a shadow fell over the table. Park. My shoulders locked. I looked up. Tarren Cade stood there with a tray, scanning the room like the cafeteria was part of his territory. Which, technically it was. His gaze landed on me, and for the smallest fraction of a second, something flickered. In his eyes, recognition maybe, or curiosity, sharpened into something heavier. Chief, Evan greeted, cheerful, oblivious. Want to join us? I'll sit, Tarren said simply, and lowered himself into the chair across from me. The air changed when he sat, tightened, darkened, like the moment before a storm decides where to break. My fork trembled. I put it down before he noticed. My body wasn't helping, heart racing, palms damp, every nerve screaming that he was too close. Everything okay? He asked, tone neutral, but his eyes fixed on me with unnerving steadiness. Perfect, I said, voice too sharp. Just living the dream. Beta life. Thrilling, really. Evan laughed, but it sounded distant. I could barely hear him over the static in my chest. We ate in silence for a few minutes, but it wasn't silence at all. It was the hum of my pulse, the weight of his stare every time I shifted. When our eyes finally met, it was accidental. Or maybe not. His gaze held mine, searching, questioning. I looked away first, stabbing at my rice like it had personally offended me. Evans stretched, unconcerned. Gotta head back. Deadlines. Good luck with Chief Cade watching over you. He left. And suddenly, it was just us. I could feel the warmth of Tarren's presence, more vivid than the sun through the glass. Neither of us spoke. The cafeteria noise faded to a blur, like the whole building was holding its breath with me. Finally, he set his fork down, deliberate. You seem off. My throat worked, dry. Maybe I'm just hungry. His eyes lingered. Not buying it. Not pushing either. Just waiting. The silence stretched so long my skin itched. I wanted to fill it with sarcasm, with anything. Instead, I forced myself to sit still, pretending I wasn't unraveling under the gaze of a man who already saw too much. The hallway I chose wasn't meant for people. It was the back spine of the building, exposed conduits running like gray veins along the ceiling, utility doors stenciled with warnings, a floor that clicked under sensible shoes. The air here was cooler, filtered, almost kind. I told myself I could breathe here. I couldn't. Halfway down the corridor, my knees gave a quiet opinion about gravity. I caught myself on the handle of a maintenance closet and bent over, teeth gritted. The patch under my sleeve had cooled and cooled until it felt like ice. Now it burned, as if some internal weather had set fire to the dam. It hit like a switch being thrown. I didn't fall, but the world tilted. Sounds sharpened, the hum from an electrical cabinet separating into individual notes. My own pulse slammed against my ribs, too fast, trying to outrun itself. And the scent, my scent, traitorous and bright, leaked around the edges of the failing chemistry. A heat I could feel even before I could smell it. No. I whispered to no one. Choking on the word. Not here. Not today. The hallway answered with silence. Sami. I didn't jump. My nerves were already a live wire. There was nowhere left to go. I turned my head slowly. Tarren stood at the far end of the corridor, halfway between shadow and the clinical light. He wasn't in a rush. He didn't need to be. The set of his shoulders said he'd seen something on a camera feed and decided to verify in person. Or maybe he'd just known. He took one step forward and stopped. His nostrils flared. So small a movement it might have been a trick of the light. The look that crossed his face wasn't hunger. It wasn't triumph. It was the raw, unpolished moment of recognition you can't rehearse for. I swayed. The handle dug into my palm. I'm fine, I said. Like a reflex. Just low blood sugar. Or gravity's on sale. He didn't come closer. He put his palm to the wall beside him, bracing as if the building had tilted for him too. A muscle worked in his jaw. His eyes were on me, and not on me. Like he was watching the space between us, calculating it, respecting it, refusing it all at once. Breathe, he said. Voice low enough to be permission, not an order. I tried. The inhale pulled heat through my chest, the exhale shook. Another step, careful. Then another. The air changed with him. Not his scent exactly, but presence. The pressure of a body that knows the room it's in. My skin prickled. My heartbeat climbed a rung. It wasn't that the patch had failed. It was that my body had decided the patch was decorative. Please, don't, I said. The words were a thread. They were all I had to hold. He stopped as if I'd pressed a hand to his chest. He dragged in a breath through his teeth and let his head touch the wall, eyes closing for a second that pulled at me like gravity. When he looked at me again, the intensity had been banked into discipline. Not gone. Never gone. But leashed. I'm not going to touch you, he said. Each word was placed, deliberate. You're safe. I wanted to believe him. My body didn't. My body was already humming to a frequency that recognized him, angry at me for lying to it so long. Heat flushed under my skin, ugly and unfair. I swallowed it like a secret. Can you walk? He asked. Yes, I said, which was both technically true and a wild hope. He nodded. There's a service elevator 2 doors down, no cameras inside. You can... He stopped, jaw tightening again, like he'd caught himself almost saying something else. You can get to the medical floor from there without the main hall. I stared at him. And you just... happen to know the routes no one uses? His mouth didn't lift. I know all the routes. A drop of sweat ran along my spine. My hands shook once, violently, then steadied through stubbornness. I peeled my palm off the door handle. If you're not going to touch me, I said, the words scraping, then don't get closer. He didn't. He stayed where he was, one hand braced to the wall like he needed it, like it was the only thing keeping him from stepping into my gravity. Listen, he said, no one is in this corridor for the next 10 minutes. I checked the patrol schedule. You have time. Time to recover. Time to adjust the patch. Time to be something that wouldn't betray me to the next person who breathed. My fingers fumbled at my sleeve. The adhesive tugged at skin. Angry. I swore under my breath, and dug a spare patch from my pocket. Habit and fear had made me hoard them. The new one trembled in my grip. I couldn't get the corner to peel. A quiet scrape, shoe on concrete. I looked up fast. Tarren hadn't moved closer, but he'd shifted his stance, shoulders a little wider, as if he could block the hallway from me without being near me at all. "Do you want me to turn around?" he asked, eyes pointed safely at my face even as every line of him said. He was paying attention to the edges, to the threats that didn't exist. "Turn around," I said. He did, without argument. His palm stayed on the wall, knuckles pale with effort. I pressed the fresh patch to my skin, counting breaths like they were beads. 1, 2, 3. The chemicals kissed the heat and started to work, not fast enough, never fast enough. "It's going to pass," he said, facing the wall. "The spike never lasts as long as your mind tells you it will." "You speak from experience?" I meant it to land as sarcasm. It landed as a plea. He exhaled. "I speak from training." The heat backed off 1 inch. The trembling settled to a shiver. The world stopped tilting quite so enthusiastically. I tucked my sleeve down and breathed through my mouth until the air was just air again. "You can look," I said, when I was sure my voice would obey. He turned. The recognition was still in his eyes, but it had been edged with something else. Anger. Not at me. At himself. At the way his hand had a faint tremor that he hid by closing it into a fist. "You're not a beta," he said quietly. No judgment. No accusation. Just a fact set gently between us. I couldn't make my face a lie fast enough. The corner of my mouth twitched toward a smile and failed. "Must be the coffee," I said, and hated the thinness of it. His mouth pressed into a line that could have been a dozen things. "You should go home." "I have work." "You have a body," he said. The slightest roughness in his voice, the kind that comes from holding a line with your teeth. "Take care of it." Silence opened like a door neither of us wanted to walk through. We stood on opposite sides of it, breathing in a corridor meant for machines. He pushed off the wall. For a second, I thought he'd step forward despite everything. He didn't. He took a step back. Then another. "This won't happen in a public space again," he said, as much to himself as to me. "I'll adjust routes." "Chief," I said, and then realized I didn't know what to ask him for. Forgiveness? Distance? An instruction that would make me less of a problem to him and to myself? He shook his head once. "Get to medical. Or go home." His eyes flicked to my sleeve, to the place where the new patch already bit into my skin. "And next time, don't do this alone." He left before I could answer, boots measured against the floor, shoulders square. The kind of retreat that is, in its own way, an act of restraint. The air he'd occupied stayed charged after he was gone, like a room that had held music too long. I slid down the wall until my knees found the ground, pressed the heel of my hand to my mouth, and breathed around the shape of a truth I couldn't cram back into its box. He knew. And worse, now that my body had recognized him in kind, I knew it would not forget. Tarren's office was too big for comfort. A wall of glass overlooked the city. Polished floors reflected the afternoon light, and a long table divided the space like a judgment bench. Everything about the room said order, authority, control. And me? I felt like a glitch in his perfect architecture. He stood by the window when I entered, hands behind his back, posture as rigid as the lines of the building. His reflection stared out at me before his face did. When he finally turned, the restraint in his jaw was sharper than the skyline. I did, though the chair felt more like a witness stand than a seat. My palms left damp prints on the armrests. The silence stretched until I wanted to scratch at it. Then, flat and quiet, he said the words I dreaded most. "You lied." It wasn't shouted. That made it worse. Each syllable landed with the precision of a hammer. My throat burned. I could have played dumb, pretend confusion, feign ignorance. But I was tired, and the lie already weighed heavier than I could carry. "I lied," I admitted, voice cracking like dry glass. "Why?" His eyes drilled into mine. Not curiosity, demanding. I swallowed hard. Tried to meet that gaze without flinching. Because I was tired of being caged. The words ripped out of me before I could tame them. My voice rose. "Everywhere I go it's the same story. An omega is a liability, a pet, a thing to manage. I wanted one place, just one, where I could be hired for what I can do, not for what I am. His mouth tightened. So you thought lying was safer? Yes. I slammed my hand against the chair's arm, breath shaking. Safer than being branded before I even start. Safer than being leered at or locked down or treated like an accident waiting to happen. The tears burned before I wanted them. I turned my face, furious at myself, furious at the weakness, but they slipped anyway. Hot, humiliating. My mask cracked, and I hated that he saw it. He exhaled sharply, pacing once across the room. Do you have any idea? He cut himself off, fists clenching at his sides. His voice dropped, rough. Do you have any idea what that did to me? I blinked at him, startled. To you? Yes, to me. He planted his palms on the desk, leaning forward. The controlled alpha, the unshakable chief. He looked frayed, undone. I felt it. Every time you walked into a room, I felt it and thought I was losing my grip. I told myself it wasn't real, that I was imagining it. Because you were a beta. My chest tightened. He wasn't angry about the form. He was angry about the way his instincts had cornered him in a lie of their own. His gaze flicked away, jaw flexing. Like he couldn't bear to look at me and couldn't quite stop. You put me in a position where I could have... He shut his mouth hard, as if the rest was a cliff edge. He turned, pacing again. The lines of his shoulders taut with something bigger than fury. I didn't ask you to feel anything, I whispered. No, he said, voice raw. But I did. And I didn't know why. And now... He broke off again, shoving a hand through his hair. For a moment, he looked less like a fortress, and more like a man drowning in his own walls. I wiped at my face, hating how shaky my hands were. I didn't lie to hurt you. I lied to survive. The words hung there, brittle, until his silence crushed them. Finally he spoke, voice low and edged. I can't do this. My heart dropped, a clean, sick fall. What do you mean? I can't. He gestured sharply, to me, to the air, to the invisible thread humming between us. Not like this. Not when everything I thought I knew was built on a lie. He grabbed his jacket from the back of the chair, shoulders rigid, eyes shadowed. He didn't look at me when he passed. Didn't pause when I whispered his name like it might stop him. The door clicked shut behind him, with more finality than a slammed one could ever have. I sat there, small in the echo of his absence, the city stretching endless outside the glass. The mask I'd worn so carefully lay shattered at my feet, and all I could do was sit among the pieces, trying to breathe around the hollow where his presence had been. 3 days crawled by like punishment. Every hour I expected an email with HR in the subject line, or a security escort, tapping me on the shoulder, politely efficient, ready to lead me out the door. Every time my badge beeped green at a scanner, I braced for it to flash red instead, but the hammer never fell. When the summons finally came, it was almost a relief. Chief Cade requests your presence. No time. No explanation. Just inevitability, in 12-point font. I walked to his office with the fatalism of someone heading to their own execution. The hallways hummed in sterile brightness. My reflection in the glass looked thinner than usual, stripped down to nerves. His office door opened at my knock. He was inside, standing by the same window as before, a skyline of steel and glass behind him. His suit jacket hung on the back of his chair, sleeves rolled once, as if control had slipped at the edges. Sit, he said. I did. My throat was sand. If this is about paperwork, I can... It's not, he cut in. Silence pressed down. I waited for the words that would end it. You're terminated. You endangered protocol. You lied. Instead, he turned fully toward me. His expression was stern, yes, but not the kind of cold finality I'd prepared for. It was conflicted. I've thought about this, he said, voice low but certain. About you, about what happened. The words burned in my chest. Then you know I should be fired. I know you lied, he agreed. His gaze didn't waver. But I also know why. I gripped the armrests, fighting the heat crawling up my throat. You don't? I do. His voice softened a fraction. You didn't want to be caged. I understand that more than you think. I froze. The room felt suddenly smaller. He moved closer to the desk, leaning forward slightly. But his posture was careful, as though not to crowd me. So I'm giving you a choice. A bitter laugh slipped out before I could stop it. A choice? That's new. His mouth twitched, something like a shadow of humor, quickly gone. I don't want a bond. I don't want to cage you. We'll do it slow. Only your rules. For a moment, I just stared, the words not connecting. My heart stuttered. What? You set the pace, he said simply. You decide if we talk, if we don't, if we sit in silence. If you ever want more. He paused, steady. It's yours to grant, not mine to take. The world tilted again, but not from weakness this time. From disbelief. My instinct was to laugh it off, to snarl, to run. But something in his face stopped me. The restraint. The sincerity edged with frustration at himself. Like this offer cost him more than he'd admit. I swallowed, voice unsteady. Why would you even? Because walking away didn't work, he said, cutting through my question. I tried. I left. And it hasn't left me alone since. His honesty hit harder than any accusation. My pulse thumped painfully against my ribs. I should have told him no. Should have told him I couldn't risk it. But the word stuck. Instead, I whispered, "You're serious?" Yes, no hesitation. I leaned back, palms slick, heart fighting itself. Part of me screamed it was dangerous, that no alpha had ever meant freedom for someone like me. Another part, the reckless, exhausted part, wanted to believe him. Slow, I repeated, tasting the word like it might break. He nodded once. Slow. The silence that followed wasn't sharp this time. It was fragile, tentative, like the first step onto unfamiliar ground. For the first time in days, the weight on my chest shifted, still heavy, but threaded with something else. Something that felt almost like hope. The lab floor had always felt like a maze of white corridors and humming machines, a place where every sound carried too far. But lately, it felt different. Not safer exactly, but bearable. Like the air had loosened an inch. Tarren and I had settled into something that wasn't quite truce, wasn't quite partnership, but lived in the space between. He didn't hover the way he used to. And when he did appear, he acted like it was deliberate, not coincidental surveillance. It almost felt normal. Almost. At the weekly operations meeting, Miller droned about compliance protocols, while half the staff tried not to yawn. I sat near the end of the table, scribbling notes I'd never read again, trying to look like a model employee. When the head of admin brought up a logistics error, misfiled data sheets, they landed the blame squarely on lab ops. My job. Mr. Park, can you explain why we've had repeated delays from your section? The admin asked, in a tone polished for humiliation. I opened my mouth, already flustered. It hadn't been me. The files had gone missing before they reached my desk. Still, trying to argue in front of 20 people felt like volunteering to be a piñata. But before I could speak, Tarren's voice cut across the room. Calm. Firm. Security logs show the delay was caused by a system error. Not Mr. Park. Every head turned. The admin blinked, caught off guard. I wasn't aware of that. You are now, Tarren said, without raising his tone. If you need the time-stamped footage, I'll forward it. The matter ended. Just like that. I stared at him, heat crawling up my neck. He didn't look at me, just went back to his tablet as if it were routine. When the meeting adjourned, I caught up with him in the corridor. Did you just rescue me? Correcting misinformation isn't rescuing. I narrowed my eyes. Because it felt like rescuing. He didn't break stride. You should get better at defending yourself. Noted, I said dryly. Next time, I'll bring a sword. That earned me the smallest twitch at the corner of his mouth. Barely there, but enough to feel like victory. The rest of the day carried that strange energy. Quiet, steady, almost companionable. When I was elbow-deep in recalibrating a machine, he appeared beside me, scanning a report, not giving orders. Just there, At one point, I reached for a panel, and my hand brushed his. Just a flicker of skin against skin. My heart stuttered. His hand stilled for a fraction too long before pulling back. Neither of us said anything. But the silence between us felt charged, alive, like the moment before a storm breaks. I busied myself with wires, pretending my pulse wasn't trying to shatter my composure. By late afternoon I realized something absurd. I hadn't once looked over my shoulder expecting to be caught out, exposed, cornered. The lie was still there, yes, but the air around it had shifted. I could breathe. Not freely, not yet, but enough. And the strangest part? It was because of him. The rooftop cafeteria was more of a secret than an amenity. A narrow stairwell led to a glass-walled nook with a handful of tables, vending machines humming like lazy bees, and a skyline so close it felt like you could touch the windows of the next tower. Most people didn't bother climbing up here. Too quiet. Too exposed. Which was exactly why I liked it. I sat with a paper cup of coffee gone lukewarm, staring at the lines of traffic threading below. For once, the hum of the building didn't follow me up. The door clicked behind me. I didn't need to look. I knew who it was from the shift in the air. "Popular spot," Tarren said. I gave a half smile without turning. "Sure. Me, the pigeons, and now security." He set his own cup down opposite mine, not asking if he could join. Just joining. The chair creaked, and suddenly the space was smaller. Not threatening, just undeniable. We sat in silence for a while, the city buzzing below, the machines buzzing beside us. My chest was too tight. My throat too full. And before I could stop myself, I spoke. "My family hated this part of me," I said quietly. His head tilted. He didn't interrupt. They wanted a safe son. A normal one. Betas don't make waves, right? They don't embarrass anyone. Don't attract the wrong kind of attention. Omegas? My voice cracked, thin. Omegas were always either precious or pathetic. Neither of those felt like me. I laughed, short and bitter. So I decided not to be one. Simple solution. Pretend hard enough, maybe it sticks. Tarren's expression didn't shift, but his eyes were steady, holding me there. Not pitying, not soft, just present. I took a shaky breath. Everywhere I went, it was the same. Schools, jobs, even friends. People look at you like you're fragile or dangerous, but never just you. I got tired of waiting for someone to see anything else. So I learned to lie before they could decide for me. The silence stretched. My coffee cooled further, forgotten in my hand. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm. That took strength. I blinked. Caught off guard. Strength? Most people collapse under that kind of pressure, he said, matter of fact. You built another skin instead. That's not weakness. I stared at him, waiting for the condescension, the inevitable sympathy that always tasted like chains. But there wasn't any. His words didn't carry pity, they carried weight, respect, and it rattled me more than pity ever had. "You're not angry?" I asked, softer than I meant to. "I am," he admitted, "at the risk you took. At the way it put you in danger." His jaw tightened. "But not at you." The rooftop felt colder, brighter. I gripped the paper cup until it crumpled. "You make it sound like I had a choice." "You did what you had to," he said simply. "And you survived. That matters." Something cracked in me at that. A quiet shift. Maybe I'd been waiting all my life for someone to say it. "You survived." And mean it like an accomplishment, not an apology. I dropped the ruined cup, pressing my palms flat to the table. My heart pounded, not from fear, but from something terrifying in its own right. Maybe I wanted him here. The thought came uninvited, curling through me with heat that wasn't panic. Dangerous, yes, but not suffocating. I forced a laugh to break the weight between us. "You're not very good at rooftop pep talks." "I'm not trying to be," he said, steady as ever. "I'm telling you what I see." And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like running from it. My apartment was small, functional, and, most importantly, mine. No polished glass, no humming walls, no cameras tucked behind discreet domes. Just 4 walls that smelled faintly of laundry detergent, and the stubborn plant on my windowsill clinging to life. When I opened the door, I half expected him not to follow. Tarren didn't belong in places like this. He belonged in rooms designed to impress. Yet he stepped inside without hesitation, ducking slightly under the frame, scanning the space out of habit before allowing himself to relax. "Cozy," he said. "That's a polite word for cramped," I replied, kicking off my shoes. His eyes flicked to the stack of books on the coffee table, the half-finished mug abandoned in the sink, the blanket I hadn't folded. He didn't comment, just set his jacket neatly over the back of the chair. I busied myself with the ritual of hosting, water, mugs, fussing over details that didn't matter. Anything to steady the beat of my heart. But when I turned, he was closer than I expected, standing in the soft light of my living room like the space had bent around him. "Relax," he said quietly. "I am relaxed," I lied, too quickly. The corner of his mouth twitched. "Sure." Something in his gaze softened though, and it undid me more than his scrutiny ever had. He wasn't demanding. He was waiting. Patient. I stepped closer, my breath catching before I'd even decided to. My hand brushed his sleeve. Accidental, deliberate, both. The warmth of him leaked through fabric, steady, solid. My chest tightened. And then, like gravity choosing a direction, I leaned in. The kiss was tentative, testing. Heat flooded my veins, too fast, too sharp. For one wild second, the world tilted again, my body screaming with memory and instinct. I stiffened. Immediately he stopped. No pressure, no chase. He pulled back just enough to give me space, his forehead still close enough that I could feel the warmth of his breath. "Your call," he murmured. My lungs rattled. I shut my eyes, counted to 3, then leaned back in, this time on my terms. The second kiss was softer, deeper, a thread I allowed myself to hold. My fingers curled against his shoulder, grounding myself in the choice. When we finally pulled apart, I realized I was shaking, not from fear, but from the sheer weight of having let it happen. I searched his face for triumph, for hunger, for anything that would prove my fears right. All I found was restraint. "You stopped," I whispered. "You tensed," he said simply. "That's the rule." The air in my apartment felt charged, but not suffocating. For once, I didn't feel caged. I felt in control. The silence stretched, fragile and strange, until I broke it the only way I knew how. "You're still annoying." His mouth curved into the faintest smile. "And you're still trouble." A laugh slipped out of me, unsteady but real. Maybe trust was terrifying. But for the first time, it didn't feel impossible. The auditorium smelled faintly of new carpet and nerves. Rows of employees filled the seats, their murmurs buzzing like static before a storm. At the front, the company's logo glowed on a screen, flanked by banners that promised innovation, progress, excellence, words polished until they no longer cut. I sat near the front row, my badge heavy against my chest. My name had been called in the announcement email that morning. Recognition ceremony for outstanding contributions. My stomach had been in knots since. Recognition. The word carried a weight I hadn't been ready for. Miller gave the usual preamble about teamwork, efficiency, the future. I tuned it out, palms sweating, heart pounding. Every instinct screamed at me to stay still, to play the role I'd chosen, to let the lie carry me just one step further. Then, I felt him. Tarren stood off to the side, at ease but alert, the way he always was. His eyes found mine, steady, grounding. He didn't nod, didn't prompt. He just looked, waiting, as if he already knew the decision I was about to make. "And now," Miller said, "we'd like to recognize Sami Park from Lab Operations, whose work has been instrumental in streamlining cross-department protocols." Applause. Too loud, too sharp. My legs moved on their own, carrying me up the steps. The lights hit me, hot and unforgiving. Miller handed me a small plaque and a handshake. "Congratulations," he said into the microphone. I took the plaque. My hand trembled. My chest felt tight. And I realized this was the moment. If I didn't speak now, I never would. I stepped up to the podium. My voice shook at first. but the words forced themselves out. Thank you. I appreciate this recognition. The crowd settled, waiting for the polite speech that should have followed. Instead, I drew a breath so deep it hurt. There's something I need to say. A ripple went through the room. I gripped the podium until my knuckles ached. I've been working here under a lie. I checked the wrong box when I applied. I said I was a beta. A hush fell, sharp and instant. You could hear the air conditioning breathe. I'm not a beta, I continued, voice stronger now, echoing across the hall. I'm an omega. And I refused to hide anymore. For a long, unbearable second, silence reigned. Every face turned toward me, unreadable. Then, slowly, a few people clapped. Scattered at first, then building, growing, until the sound filled the room. Not pity, not dismissal, but respect. The kind of applause that carried weight. I exhaled, trembling, my throat raw with relief. When I stepped back, I saw him. Tarren hadn't moved from his place at the side, but his presence filled the stage more than the applause did. He didn't stride forward to shield me, didn't put a possessive hand on my shoulder. He just stood there, close enough that the room knew where he stood. Not as my protector, as my partner. Our eyes met. He gave the smallest nod. The kind that said this was yours to claim, not mine. The ceremony wound down after that, but I barely remembered the speeches. All I remembered was the thundering of my own heart, and the way the air no longer felt like a cage. Later, outside the auditorium, people congratulated me, some awkwardly, some sincerely. I smiled, thanked them, let their words wash over me. But it was when the crowd thinned, and Tarren came to stand beside me, that the weight finally lifted. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. The silence was comfortable now, filled with something new, something earned. I looked at him, then out at the city beyond the glass. My chest loosened. My lungs finally open. For the first time, I'm not lying. For the first time, I'm free.